The thing about going bananas is that if you're going bananas for God, it's actually quite a cool thing to do.
Knowing God feels really good.
God's like a friend.
A friend to talk to.
I can really talk to God when I'm in my room and I'm lonely.
He's always there for me and I can always trust him.
How do I feel about him? Well, I really love him.
Just because he's the best, really.
The Bible says,
"Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Never rely on what you think you know. Remember the Lord in everything you do, and he will show you the right way."
if you think about it, if God is God, you can't go too over the top about him, because he's God. He's worth everything we could ever give him and everything we could ever do for him. Introducing the story of Jemimah. Jesus had been invited for dinner to the house of a religious man called Simon. It was a very posh do, and they all had to sit at table on little sofa-like things, which were the custom in those days. Unfortunately, the evening did not get off to a good start. Simon and his friends kept talking on and on about details of the religious law at the time. And though they tried to draw Jesus into the conversation, Jesus did not seem the least bit interested. "Teacher," said Simon, "how far would you say you could take your ox on the Sabbath day without it counting as work? Would you say it was 2.5 kilometers or 2.8? Jesus was playing with the olives on his plate and seemed not to have heard. Simon tried again. "Teacher, have you seen that riveting report on ceremonial washing that has just come out of Jerusalem? It really makes for quite a read." Again, there was no response. Loads of people from the town had turned up, hoping that Jesus would do a miracle, or at least say something interesting. They were hanging in at the windows and peeping through the doorway, but most had by now resigned themselves to the fact that tonight was going to be a washout. "Jesus can't get a word in edgewise with that bloke going on at him," grumbled one. "Never mind, I'm sure he'll bless our children on his way home if we get them out of bed," said another more optimistic soul. All of a sudden, a local woman burst into the room. The Bible doesn't tell us her name, but I'm going to call her Jemimah. "Oh no," thought Joash, Simon's chief servant. "What's she doing here? There's nothing but trouble when she's around." You see, Jemimah had a very bad reputation. It seemed that she had a different bloke round every night. Most respectable people in the town would cross the road rather than look at her. "If the boss sees her," thought Joash, looking desperately at Simon, "I'll have to get myself a new job tomorrow morning. Quick, I'd better head her off before she gets to any of the important guests." He looked around the room. Jesus was still very taken with the olives on his plate and seemed not to have noticed Jemimah. Simon and his friends were so busy talking that they wouldn't have noticed if the roof fell in. "Good," thought Joash, "I'm in with a chance. I'll make up some silly story and get her out the room before they even know she's been here." So, that's what he did. "Hey, Jemimah," Joash called out, in what he hoped was a whisper that only she could hear. "There's an old friend of yours called Jethro out in the kitchen, and he's dying to meet you again. Why don't you come out and have a chat?" But it was too late. Either Jemimah didn't hear, or she was just too involved in what she was doing to take much notice. Joash couldn't believe his eyes. Jemimah had burst into tears all over Jesus. But instead of choosing to cry on Jesus' shoulder, for some reason, she'd gone for his feet. Jemimah cried so much that Jesus' feet were sopping wet. Then, after a time, she started drying them with her hair. It was all so embarrassing. Even some of the faces looking in at the window were turning pink. To top the whole thing off, Jemimah then took out a bottle of really expensive perfume, uncorked the stopper, and, would you believe it, she chucked the whole lot on Jesus' feet. The heavy, musky scent filled the air. Needless to say, Simon, the host, had seen it all, not to mention smelt it. The strange thing was, Simon seemed more offended with Jesus than he was with Jemimah or Joash. If Jesus really is a man of God, Simon thought to himself, he would know that this woman has lived a bad life and not let her near him. Fancy letting her touch him with all that hair. He'll be ritually unclean for weeks. Jesus, on the other hand, seemed quite pleased with Jemimah's attention. Thanks a lot, he said, grinning broadly. My feet will smell much better now. Simon, said Jesus, turning suddenly to his host, there's something that I want to tell you. Yes, teacher, said Simon in that superior way he had. Have you seen this woman, Simon? Said Jesus. Yes, said Simon, his lip curling slightly. One could hardly miss her. Well, this woman has been very kind to me by washing my feet this evening, said Jesus. Simon's lip curled all the more. You see, Simon, Jesus went on, you haven't really been very polite to me since I entered your house. You were more interested in showing off to me than making me feel at home. But this woman has gone completely bananas to show me just how much I'm worth. Simon looked down at the floor, embarrassed. Jesus went on. Whatever you may think of her, Simon, this woman knows that she's lived a bad life, and she is very sorry. That's why she's crying. You think that you're all right, and that worries me far more. The person who thinks they are perfect will never know how good it is to be forgiven by God, said Jesus, his voice ringing now. Then Jesus turned to Jemimah. Thank you for showing me such kindness and love this evening, he said. I forgive you for all that you have done wrong in your life. There was a sharp intake of breath from just about everybody in the room. Who had the right to say something like that? Surely only God could forgive a person's sins. Jesus spoke again to Jemimah, this time even more gently. You needed to be put right with God, and you knew it, he said. Go in peace. And with that, Jesus left.